So welcome back to this Saturday live stream. Let me turn on my camera. Oh. And take down this picture. Sorry about that, you guys. Welcome back to my live stream. We have an incredible show planned for you today. My name is Swamp Rose, if this is your first time here. And welcome back to my returning audience. Thank you for the live chat being here. And it's already pretty live. We have a lot to talk about today. There are updates in the case against Bryan Kohberger, things that I've never talked to you about. And we were just backstage discussing everything. I want to bring through a special guest who's going to deliver this information to you, or help me deliver this information to you real well. Now, many of you know her as Miss Potts. I want to bring forward my dear friend, Annie, who has been showing me so much about this case. And Annie, actually, I don't know if she's there yet. Annie, you're on mute. Anyway, I have Annie here.
Oh, I'm sorry, honey. Here I am. Hi.
So good to have you here for the first time. I've been dying to have you on the show for a while because I love your review of all the documents. I mean, you're kind of my go-to channel for reviewing all these new documents, and I'm just so grateful you decided to join us this morning. And I also have my friend Robert here too.
Good morning, ladies.
Well, I appreciate the invite. You know I love you. So, when you said, hey, want to come on? I said, of course, anything for you.
That's awesome. And we were just backstage talking about two separate things. So I'm going to let the audience know what we're going to talk about in the show. I mean, we have quite a bit of different subjects, but the two things we really wanted to focus on are some information that are in these transcripts, these newly released transcripts from the redacted hearing on the 23rd. And two subjects that we were talking about backstage were the YSDR profiles in Gamet's testimony. We were also talking about Payne's testimony regarding the male B and D unknown samples of blood. And so we have a lot to talk about. And the first thing I wanted to kind of touch base on is you were telling me about these YSDR profiles. And what's really interesting when I read these transcripts is that title in itself kind of denotes a mixed sample. Is that did I get that right, Miss Potts?
Based on everything that I have found regarding YSTR testing and why it would be done, it's almost always because you have a mixed sample. It could be a mixed sample of multiple males, and you're trying to separate the Ys to figure out which males. Do you understand? Or you could have a sample that is largely major female, minor male, and you're trying to isolate the Y. Usually the most common application for YSTR testing that I could find has to do with like SA kits. But it can also be for just mixed samples, period, whether you have multiple male, largely female, minor male. It's almost always for a mixed sample, yes. You're muted, honey.
I'm wondering if we should even bring up page 96, 95, and 96 of these transcripts, because what it sounds like is that they didn't, from what you were saying to me, it doesn't sound like they felt it necessary to isolate these different samples. And
well, it looks like what they did is so Matthew Gamet, when he's talking about the YSTR testing, he's being asked, right? His communications, early communications with Othram after the samples delivered, right? His communications were regarding the type of analysis and the type of searching they're doing. And then he says, I remember having significant discussion with them about YSTR testing and if or how that would be accomplished. And Anne asks, why did you want Othram to do that? He says the reason for the testing is to utilize different investigative databases that might be out there. But he also says, I don't believe in this case we ever did the YSTR testing, right? And according to him, the reason is because they just wanted to see where they could go with the traditional SMP and with doing the whole genome sequencing. But then later in the, as he's testifying, he also says that they asked Othram to do bootstrapping. So it says here, I do remember some discussion with David Middleman at Othram about if they were able to bootstrap some of the whole genome sequencing in order to develop a Y profile. So what they're doing is they're saying, okay, let's skip this YSTR testing. And since Othram has already sequenced the whole genome, let's ask them to isolate the Y. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So he wants them to develop a Y profile that could be searchable from the data they had already developed, instead of using additional sample to specifically develop a YSTR profile or any kind of Y profile. So it looks like what they wanted Othram to do, they know they have this mixed sample. They don't want to do YSTR testing, but then they ask Othram if it's possible to still isolate the Y without having to do YSTR testing. They want him to bootstrap it instead and develop the Y profile.
And I think another thing that was interesting that you were telling me is when we were kind of saying, well, do we know if is this an unknown sample? And what makes you had a comment about why you think that this would be unknown, because they already had the profile of the known people.
Well, right. So I just looked at it as, okay, so for what, like over 2.5 years, we've been told the only source of DNA on this sheath was single source transfer, touch DNA, correct? And then we find out from Riley Nolan's testimony, there was also blood. So I'm of the opinion, this is just my observation and my opinion, that if you have the skin cells from the transfer DNA and you know that that is not a mixed sample, right? So you're not even going to be having conversation at the lab about YSTR testing unless you have a mixed sample somewhere in these samples that were sent from the crime scene. And I don't think it's the skin cells and the touch DNA. I think they're talking about a source that is a mixed sample that is either two males or it's a largely female sample, small male.
Yeah, you wouldn't think they'd even have to isolate, or they would, yeah, because they would know what the sample is. That makes a lot of sense.
Do you get what I'm saying? Like if they only had male DNA and they know it's just male, then they wouldn't even be discussing YSTR testing.
This is the first time I've learned
unless
about
it's a mixed male sample. Yeah, unless it's a mixed male sample. They could have a sample that's multiple males, and you'd want to do YSTR testing for that.
But in that case, it brings up multiple suspects. This is crazy. The other thing.
Well, it also makes me wonder too, if it's the blood sample from the sheath that they're talking about, and say you do have mixed male, it just makes me curious as to how you determined whether or not the blood belonged to a victim, right? Say the sample is 2 men. You're trying to figure out which 2 men contributed to the sample. How did you ensure that one of those samples didn't belong to a victim in order to pursue the other? Do you get what I'm saying? Or if the sample is, say, largely female, minor male, how did you determine which female that blood belonged to? Did you rule out the victims? Because I'm not seeing like testimony about that in these transcripts. So it's just interesting to me that it wasn't like really followed up on, or, I have lots of questions.
I have lots of questions too. And, when we talk about the unidentified DNA, what blows my mind is that, yes, maybe they have worked up profiles since they handed over the unidentified DNA profiles like 6 months after Bryan Kohberger's arrest, in that hearing where where they were brought up. So we know the defense, we don't know, but we assume the defense now has samples of these unknown male DNA. But it blows my mind that nobody would ever want to identify those. It doesn't make any sense in a logical world. And come to find out, I guess it's pretty prevalent, you know, to have samples in crimes that aren't uploaded or any genetic testing done to. But in this case, with the magnitude of this crime, with the reach of this crime all across the world, the thought that you wouldn't identify these, if there were more than one extreme offender, what a public safety issue that is. Like, how could you even let that go? That is the point of arresting someone, is to, you know, aside from justice, is to keep society safe. And it's mind-blowing to me that it hadn't been a subject until it was brought up by the defense. Is there something they don't know? Is it a first? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well,
Could it be a responder, or I don't know.
I think what's really interesting about it is that until we got this transcript, we had no idea there was blood also found with this single source. You understand? So we find out that no, in fact, there was someone else's DNA on this sheet that clearly doesn't belong to Bryan, is kind of the point that I'm getting at, right? They know that whatever this blood is that's on the sheet, if they did take a sample of it, they definitely compared it to their little skin cell sample to see if they match. You see what I'm saying? Because that would be just there you go. There we go, direct match. The blood on the sheet matches the touch DNA. It's a bing, bang, done type situation. But if the blood on the sheath belonged to a victim, for example, we'll say it's heavy female, minor male. Obviously, that would dictate, well, if this sheath was found next to a victim who was stabbed, it's likely the female victim's blood. My question is how did they determine that? Because it's not talked about in the transcript at all as to how any of these other blood samples at the crime scene were compared against, like, say, the male victim. How did you ensure that this blood didn't belong to the male victim? I haven't heard that talked about.
And that's when it becomes, well, okay, the other thing too is, I mean, the fact is that how could it be unknown DNA sample 6 months after the crime if it did belong to the victim? And
clearly they know that all four don't relate to each other. All four are different.
Yeah, I don't see how, if the blood, the unknown sample, could be called unknown sample if it belonged to the victim. I think you're totally right. It's breathtakingly scary. The other part is hearing the testimony of Payne saying, you know, we will do further testing if it becomes necessary. I don't understand where that language ever comes in. Kind of brings us back to, is there something else that we don't know? And one of the interesting things that we were talking about backstage is we hear this pivot from the defense that happened in December. So for 2 years, basically, we heard the defense saying in documents and in open court, they aren't sure how the investigators found Bryan Kohberger. And then it pivoted in December, and we hear Logston saying in writing, they found Bryan Kohberger via investigative genetic genealogy on December 19th. But then, you know, I was looking at, we'll bring up the transcripts, but I was looking at Blaker's PCA, and it clearly states that they were looking at an email that belonged to BK on the 16th and looking in CVS. And it's just like, was that pivot because she's trying to lock them in on a date? Was it sort of like some sort of defensive strategy, some sort of trap for them? Or is this just still, I don't know. I just don't know how they can officially state that they found him on the 19th, and then we're seeing in documents, and what we'll bring up in these transcripts that you just brought up to me about the male B and D blood. It does sound like they had Bryan's name before the 19th. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out.
It's my very strong opinion. I'm not going to lie to you. It's my very strong opinion that they, when it comes to Kohberger, I think they were on to him long before December 19th. I think that, how can I put this? So it would appear to me that Brett Payne knows he can't say they were on to Bryan Kohberger before December 19th. He knows he can't say that they were following him or doing anything prior to December 19th, which is very, very interesting that he would think he can't admit that, right? What's the problem? What's the problem? Like, why can't you say how you got to him? There's clearly something in between November 22nd, when all this DNA from the crime scene is getting to the lab, and then December 10th, when the FBI is coming in and saying, stop all your work and give it all to us. There's something going on in between those 2 weeks, in my opinion, that led them to him.
I couldn't agree with you more. And since we're on the subject, before we bring that up, I just want to bring up a couple other things. Like, number one, when we saw Massoff in that May 30th hearing requesting the actual subpoenas from the federal grand jury, what was so interesting about that is we hear the prosecution get up and say, you know what, you have the entire scope of what was in these hearings, what was in those, what was returned to us. You don't need the actual subpoena itself. And Massoff's answer was, it was kind of like, when I heard it, I'm like, that doesn't sound like a big deal. What's the problem? But her answer was, we need to know these dates. And then she went right into, we still don't know how the state got to our client. Now, at first, it didn't seem like those two statements were connected. But when we find out that lots of the early rumors are turning out to be somewhat true in this case, it makes me think back to an early rumor that grand jury convened a week after the crimes. And it rumored that some of those subpoenas had Bryan Kohberger's name in it. So it does seem like there's something else we're not being told, particularly when you see Chief Fry pulling up in a U-Haul that says Pennsylvania across it. And we associate that with what we thought was law enforcement in 4chan, you know, and just a couple things that just also, oh, and then Christy Gonzalez mentioning that the ISP officers told her Bryan Kohberger's name on the 13th of December. Swirling the name,
like swirling his name around then. Well, I mean, it's very interesting. I've always been of the opinion they knew of Bryan Kohberger before the crime, but not in the way that people think.
I'd love to hear you elaborate on that a little. I have thoughts too.
I mean, I just personally look at it as he's the goddamn teacher's assistant for the criminology course at WSU. Right after these crimes happened, he's in class. He's listening to all these students. He's hearing what's going on. He's hearing the rumors. Know what I mean? That's how I look at it. He's in class with all of these kids who also know these kids from the other college, and they're all talking about what happened. I've always been of the opinion that, I'll just say this. If I was Bryan Kohberger and I had a feeling that, you know, something's not right here, especially when we find out in this transcript that he was actually contacted, that WSU officers made contact with him prior to running his vehicle. If I'm Bryan Kohberger and I feel like something's not right here, you know what I mean? I may want to just kind of like keep a record, just in case.
Well, gosh, when you bring up the WSU officers reaching out to him, that really gets to me, because we read in the PCA about the BOLO, and it's on the 23rd of December. And it's like, if officers were running his name and reporting him and pulled up a picture inside bushy eyebrows, like, and that tip allegedly got lost. Like, why didn't somebody say, oh, wait, they're running Bryan Kohberger's name. We have that name. Wow, what a match. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense.
It's really interesting regarding the tip line, too, that what they're saying in these transcripts is like, oh, yeah, no. The FBI set up the tip line, right? And according to Bill here, I think it's in one of these filings. Maybe it's not in the transcript. It might be in one of the motions in limine they just filed. Talking about how basically, even though they received thousands of tips for alleged perpetrators, people who may be involved in the crime. Well, interestingly enough, the only ones that could be substantiated are the ones pertaining to Kohberger. So it's just my strong opinion that, I mean, I just look at it as, well, yeah, if you set up a tip line and then you flood your own tip line and then you only follow the tips coming in for the guy you're already looking at, it's going to be a lot easier to substantiate the tip, right? If that's the only tip you're focusing on.
Well, that's infuriating when you hear, because we always hear about tunnel vision in cases and it being the biggest problem and cause of biasy. And then to hear that you would ignore tips because they're not valid, even to the point where you want to block them from court. Yeah, and it just brings it goes back to other things, like when you try to take away alternative suspect theories, particularly when some of these if these alternative suspect theories have circumstantial evidence that suggests a strong circumstantial evidence against the defendant, it seems somewhat exculpatory to withhold those from withhold them from the jury seeing. I don't know, but that's the way it feels to me. Same as is trying to take away suppress the AT&T advanced timing records, the Bryan Kohberger. It's almost like trying to, if that is the state truly requesting that, it's almost like forcing Bryan Kohberger to take the stand by taking away information that's been deemed exculpatory by a expert witness. That's my thoughts on
yeah, and the way I look at it too is if you're the state, and you know, a couple of the filings from the state on that case summary page are very interesting, right? When you see that, like the state, for example, they want anything to do with any alibi defense, right? He can only give it himself. I don't know who wants his AT&T timing advance reports out. I would assume it's the state, right? Because the state is the ones basically saying that the people who can support his alibi, we already know it's the CSLI experts hired by the defense. They want to use his phone data to support his alibi. And the state's saying no. The state also wants to suppress any evidence of an alternative perpetrator. That's very interesting to me. Why would you want to do that? Know what I mean? I get it. You're the state. You want to be able to, okay, you've said for almost 3 years now, he's the lone perpetrator. He's the only one. But even the judge said, I mean, if you have other DNA at this crime scene that wasn't pursued, then yeah, maybe there's something we need to look into here. Sounds like you have other suspects, right? Even the judge understands that.
And I don't know why it's not more of a public outcry, particularly for the city of Moscow, Idaho. Like, I understand the pursuant of justice and, like, you know, supporting the police if they believe that they have the right person, but the thought that in your community that there might be other perpetrators out there, I don't understand why there's more of an outcry. I feel like the best thing to do would be to unseal the case, but we have 4 months to go, and I don't anticipate that they would do any of that. But I think it's just time for us to see everything that they have. I see we got Robert from True Crime Unraveled back. Robert, you're getting ready for your daughter's birthday party, so I appreciate you jumping back on the stream while you had a minute.
I'm actually driving to the bakery right now, so to pick up her cake. So I can't stay up here very long. Yeah, I'm a road rage type of driver, but yeah, I'm gonna have to get off of here. Yeah, because I don't want to get pulled over for being on a live stream on my phone. The police here don't frown upon that. I will message you later, Kiki. Miss Potts, I love your channel, and I'll always be here to support you, Miss Potts.
Oh, well, thank you. I hope your daughter has an awesome birthday.
Yeah, she turns 10 years old tomorrow, but we're doing the party today.
Official double digits.
Yeah, I'm not looking to 13. Yeah,
it's fun.
So, yeah, and she's got her daddy's looks and also she has my snarkiness. But I will talk to you guys later. Yeah, this is like maniac driving today here in Wichita. So I'll talk to you guys later.
Thanks for popping
Bye,
up.
Robert.
I don't know. I think if you don't mind, I'd love to pull up page 9 and maybe read some of that transcript from Brett Payne and see what, and so everyone can see what we're talking about with the male unknown B and D. Do you mind doing that?
I got it. Yeah, you want mine?
Do you? Yeah,
You have yours, right?
yeah.
I can follow along on mine. I have it up.
Okay, let me go to page 9 here, and
starts on line 4 where she's asking him the first time he heard Kohberger's name.
Perfect. Okay. All right, you guys. So, and by the way, before I get started, whoops, how did that happen? I just wanted to say I have Miss Potts' handle up here. So if you all, before we get started, please go visit her channel and give her a sub and a like. I guarantee that if you follow this case, you're not going to find a better way to keep up to date with the documents than her live stream. Plus, she has an awesome community. So anyway, there's her handle. Please visit her channel before we get started here.
Oh, thanks, Kiki.
Well, thank you for coming up here and helping me sort through all of this paperwork. All right, let me put that on full screen for us. And I'm going to start right here at page 4, you guys. So the question is, and when was the first time you heard Bryan Kohberger's name? The first time I heard Bryan Kohberger's name, well, I should do it like this. Answer, the first time I heard Bryan Kohberger's name was December 19th, 2022. Question, and what was that a result of? Answer, that was a result of investigative genetic genealogy that was being undertaken by the FBI. We had a phone call that evening and we were told Bryan Kohberger's name. Question, and before that, Mr. Kohberger was not on your radar? Answer, no, ma'am. Question, before December 19th, was the FBI CAS team member collected with you? Answer, yes, ma'am. Question, how long had he been collected with you? Answer,
Co-located.
Oh, co-located. I was like, what is he talking about? Hello, time to take my coffee. Answer, I don't remember exactly, but it had been several weeks at that point. Answer, and was that Nicholas Balance, who you guys is the FBI agent, you guys? Answer, yes, ma'am. Question, what other FBI team members were co-located with you? Answer, goodness, a lot. We had technical assistance by Maria Tyndall, S.A. Jacobson, and numerous other FBI special agents that were there to assist. Question, by the time it was December 19th and you first heard Bryan Kohberger's name, had you reviewed the videotapes? Answer, yes, ma'am. Question, how many hours of videotapes do you think you reviewed? Hold on a second. I'm just making sure my camera's off. Answer, I don't remember. A lot. I can't give you an accurate representation. Question, in those videotapes, did you focus in on a particular ones that were of interest to you? Answer, yes, ma'am. In particular would be are you talking about the address that we were, how would you like me to refer to them? Question, how do you nickname the cameras? Answer, so the first one was from 111 2 King Road. It was surveillance camera, an exterior surveillance camera on the house that was immediately to the northeast of 1122 King Road. There was some footage from Linda Lane camera, and I forget the address off the top of my head. There was footage from A&W, which was at the corner of Lauder and South Main or Highway 95. There was footage from an address on Indian Hills. There was also footage from Ridge Road camera. And that's how we referred to them, was basically by those names. Question, with those references in mind and keeping December 19th in mind, which of those cameras were your focus before you learned Bryan Kohberger's name? And Miss Potts, this gets, you want me to keep reading? This gets to the unknown male B and D. I should keep going here?
Yeah, he gets to, okay, so the questioning obviously goes through the cameras and stuff. She's laying the foundation to get him to talk about exactly how you're doing this work and when his name is becoming known to you, because it's my very strong opinion. This is just my opinion. She already knows that he knew his name long before December 19th. And she's just trying to lay the foundation here for this guy to trip up. That's just my opinion.
I
But
kind of
it
thought
starts
that.
on page, yeah, it starts on page 18, line 15 is where she asks him, hang on, sorry, line 13 is where she starts. What efforts did you make to pursue unknown male B?
Oh, perfect. Okay, I'm going to start at line 4 here, you guys. And let's see. So question. I'll ask you. Oh, let me put this back on full screen. Hold on. I'm sure the audience will. Whoa, why do I keep doing that? All right, question. I'll ask somebody else that later. All right, so after you receive Bryan Kohberger's name and he hasn't been on your radar at all before, is that right? Answer, correct. Question, all right. You had pursued interviews and surveillance video. How did you pursue evidence found inside the scene at 1122 King? Wait, did I say that right? No. Had you pursued evidence found inside the scene at 1122 King? Answer, yes, ma'am. Questions. What efforts did you make to pursue unknown male B? Answer. You have to be more specific. I don't remember exactly where unknown male B came from. Question. If I told you the lab report showed unknown male B came from the blood spot on the handrail going between the second and the first floor, does that help jog your memory? Answer. Yes, ma'am. Question. Why did you not pursue that person? Answer. At that point in time, we had already received Mr. Kohberger's name. And from what my understanding was, entering another DNA profile into CODIS would remove the previous one we had from the knife sheath. So if memory serves, the discussion was, we'll hold off, we'll stay with the one from the knife sheath, and if we need to, we can address the unknown male B at another time. I'm so infuriating to hear. Question.
Now, if we can now, right, let's just stop right here for one second, because when you get back up to line 17 and her question is, if I told you this lab report shows that unknown male B came from blood spot on the handrail between second and first floor, does that jog your memory? Yes, ma'am. Well, why didn't you pursue that person? Well, because at that point in time, we already had received Mr. Kohberger's name. That's interesting, considering all of the DNA from this crime scene is at the lab by November 22nd. Okay? So if you didn't know his name until the 19th of December, why are you saying that male B blood was not pursued in November because you already knew Kohberger's name? Right? Didn't he just say didn't he just say like 4 pages up here that he did not get Bryan Kohberger's name until December 19th? All of this DNA they're talking about is what was collected and at the lab by November 22nd. Correct? Unless I'm wrong about that. But the blood from the handrail, it's my understanding the investigators became aware of all unknown male DNA at this crime scene, and they were aware of it by November 22nd. So I don't understand why he is saying they did not pursue male B blood because they already had Kohberger's name.
And this goes beyond that too. He says the same thing about male D blood as well, correct?
Yeah, and for him to say, oh, well, it was my understanding that if we tried to put another profile into CODIS, it's going to kick out the first one. I have no idea what he means by that. It's my understanding you can put multiple profiles into CODIS from a crime scene. It's not one. You can't just, it's not like, I think what he's trying to say here is, I mean, we can only pursue one suspect at a time. And I don't think that's accurate.
Annie, if that were the case, like it would mean that you'd never be able to pursue a crime where there's more than one perpetrator. That doesn't ring true. And I just don't see how they could even build a system where that would be the process. It's
very interesting. It's one of the notes that I left here because I marked this whole transcript up and I even wrote notes here on my own transcript. And I'm like, well, this is weird. First, Payne says that they did not know BK's name till December 19th, 2022. But now he's saying they ignored male B blood known to the investigators by this blood is all known by the end of November. He's saying they ignored it because they already had his name.
So, you know, like aside from like the infuriation about the process, I mean, can everybody, I hope in the chat, you guys can all see how he's giving a blatant contradiction right there. I also underlined these lines because just as somebody who's never followed a true crime case before, it is breathtaking when you hear this. Hear him say, so if my memory serves me, the discussion was, we'll hold off and we'll stay with the one from the knife sheath. If we need to, we'll address the unknown male B at a later time. I don't know when that later time would be. I don't know what circumstance would warrant them to go search those things. What greater circumstance could you have where you would go pursue the other suspect? It doesn't make any sense to me. Why wouldn't be pursuing everything all at once? Is it because you only have resources to narrowly go after one person? It doesn't make any sense. Why focus on only one person if the evidence is possibly showing you more? I don't know.
Well, that's kind of how I look at it too. Obviously, if I have all of these samples from a crime scene. I've already determined that they don't belong to any of the victims. We know that these are, none of these profiles belong to the victims in the home. I'm not exactly sure why you're only pursuing the transfer touch DNA and not pursuing the actual other people's blood in the crime scene. Right? Most courts aren't even going to rely on touch or transfer DNA. The military doesn't rely on it. You rely on the actual DNA in a crime scene, blood, semen, hair, sweat of the perpetrator. You're not usually, especially, I could understand if the only evidence you had at this crime scene was the touch DNA, which is what they had us believing for a while now, right? According to them, the only evidence in this crime scene was this touch DNA. Well, now we find out that's absolutely untrue.
And it brings me back to like when I first, when I educated myself on touch transfer DNA for this case, one of the things it brings me back to is Meg P had shared with me the original peer-reviewed studies where touch transfer DNA was discovered and became introduced to law enforcement, which happened in Australia. And the original peer-reviewed article that appeared was titled Fingerprint Within Fingerprint. And the observations, just the earliest observations of touch transfer DNA, was that you had to have an identifying marker to use it. So for instance, I guess it would be the sheath. There's a piece of evidence, they're saying the piece of evidence had his DNA, but essentially they called it fingerprint within fingerprint because they wanted it always, like they got the sample from within a fingerprint, but they knew that the sample had problems because they would isolate samples to test for touch transfer DNA. And sometimes these phantom readings would happen with touch transfer DNA that wasn't even in the room. So they said, only time you use this investigative work is for tips and to look at things that were already within evidence. So to me, when I hear about blood on a sheath or in a crime scene, that sounds like evidence within evidence. It's within an area you would test. Again, I would love somebody within law enforcement or somebody with knowledge to tell us, why wouldn't they test blood on a crime scene? I have read all of the CODIS requirements, and it does sound like this is within the scope. So then it brings us back to, is Brett Payne right? Does CODIS have a flaw where you can only pursue one suspect at a time? I don't know.
I mean, I'm not sure. I just think it's very interesting when you think about it. For a long time, all we were told was that it was just this transfer DNA, this touch DNA, right? Which is basically like microscopic dust particles. It's about the same thing, right? I just look at it in the sense that this crime scene, clearly, you found more than this transfer DNA at the crime scene. The problem with transfer DNA, in my opinion, is that, for example, I mean, the Lucas Anderson case, in my opinion, is probably one of the greatest cases to highlight if you need to explain easily to a juror exactly how their DNA can end up at a crime scene that they've never been to. The Lucas Anderson case highlights that perfectly, right? So the way I look at it is if you're in this crime scene, you have other male blood that you can't identify. You probably shouldn't focus on the transfer DNA. You should be focusing on those blood samples that are in your crime scene. Clearly, someone injured themselves in the commission of this crime, and they bled in the house. And it's more than one male. They know that the males are not the same male. They know that these are different profiles from different men.
The chat is all agreeing with you, by the way. Everyone seems to have the same sentiments. Oh, and we got AR here too.
Hey, AR. So yeah, I mean, I'm just of the opinion that if you're at this crime scene and you're getting all of these, you're finding, the lab is telling you like, hey, the samples that you sent us, we got like 4 fucking males here. Pardon my language, right? We got like 4 unknown males here. Doesn't belong to the male victim. Don't know who these people are. I understand you have some skin cells off the sheath, but if you have 3 to 4 other men's blood in the middle of your crime scene, that should be your main focus, in my opinion.
Now, what about from what we just read, when we were looking at page 95 and 96, can you just explain, do you think that there was an unknown female DNA? Can you explain that to me again?
Well, I'm not sure if there's female. So initially, when I saw that there was heavy discussion about all this YSTR testing they were doing at the lab or wanting to do, I was like, that's interesting, because I know what the YSTR testing is usually for. I was like, oh, that's weird, because the most common application for YSTR testing is going to be with SA kits. And I was like, oh, shit, I thought maybe, okay, did they find semen at the crime scene? Because that's actually the most common application is going to be for an SA kit. And it's usually because they are trying to isolate the Y, the male, from the female to determine who the male perpetrator is of the SA victim, right? Mm-hmm. But then I did a little bit more research and saw that you could do YSTR testing if you have a mixed sample that's multiple male. You could also do YSTR testing if you mix sample that is major female, minor male, and you're trying to isolate the Y, the male. So in my opinion, if they're heavily discussing at the lab in the beginning with these samples, whichever sample they're talking about, heavy discussion of doing YSTR testing, possible YSTR testing, it's because they know they have a mixed sample. Whatever sample they're talking about is a mixed sample, whether it's mixed multiple male or it's mixed with major female, minor male, I don't know.
Let me pull this back up. Well, I'm going to keep reading down here if you don't mind. And I want to keep going till we talk about the male D. And I mean, I told you I was going to keep you on here for an hour. We're already at 46 minutes. So I want to get as much time out of you much time with you as I can.
It's totally good. There isn't a time limit. So please don't feel rushed or anything like that. It's my day off and I'm just chilling in my jammies. So don't worry.
Nice. I hope you're enjoying your day off too. Here, let me go.
Oh, well, thank you. I am. I'm hanging out with all you guys. So I'm having fun.
I know this is my favorite thing to do on a Saturday too. All right. All right. So I left off right here on line 6. So I want to make sure I understand your testimony. Were you not aware of the unknown male B until after December 19th when knew Bryan Kohberger, when you knew Bryan Kohberger's name, excuse me? Answer: no, ma'am. I was aware of that before. Yes. How did unknown male D? Question: how about unknown male D? Answer. Again, you're going to have to be more specific. Question. If I told you unknown male D came from the lab report from a sample of blood on some gloves outside the house, does that refresh your memory? Answer. Yes, ma'am, it does. Question. You're aware of that too? Answer. Yes, ma'am. Question. I want to back up and talk about the affidavits. I think you told me in a prior hearing that you were the person that wrote Exhibit A, or the affidavit in support of the search warrants. When it came to looking for things about Bryan Kohberger, did I understand you right? Answer. Yes, ma'am. Question. And that affidavit, when you began, was that on December 23rd to get records? Answer. As far as when I started writing the affidavit, is that what you're referring to? Question. The first search warrant that applied to Bryan Kohberger. Answer. I believe that was December 23rd. Yes. Question. When did you begin writing that affidavit? Answer. I began writing that affidavit long before that. It had been a running affidavit because at the beginning of it, there's a walkthrough of the crime scene. There's numerous things. It was a living document. So we just, I don't know. You want to say something right there?
It's wild to me. It's so wild to me that this guy's answer is it was a living document. I know I give Brett Payne a lot of shit, but I'm like, this guy literally thinks he's Captain America. He thinks his affidavit is like the Constitution. It's a living document. Ridiculous. And he's talking about, oh yeah, well, the first search warrant that applied to Bryan Kohberger, I believe it was December 23rd. When did you begin writing that affidavit? Well, I began writing it long before that. Now, I just want to stop here because according to Brett Payne, the first search warrant ever written for Bryan Kohberger is December 23rd. And do you know how many people said that that stupid K-bar warrant was for Bryan Kohberger?
Good point.
That K-bar warrant, if I remember correctly, that K-bar warrant is like December 6th or something, isn't it? Weren't the Blue Ridge knives and the K-bar warrants, wasn't that stuff like beginning of December? So if they're looking into knife purchases and stuff in the beginning of December, then those warrants aren't for Kohberger. I don't know why people would think they are.
That actually brings up something else that I wanted to show you guys. Hold on. I pulled this up in one of my last videos. Let me zoom in on this so we can take a closer look. So one of my mods, Mikey, brought me this excerpt, and this is from Blaker's PCA. Hold on. Am I sharing that? There we go. I gotta take this banner down. So when Brett Payne talks about how he didn't know Bryan Kohberger's name until the 19th, I just want to read this excerpt from the Pennsylvania probable cause affidavit. Furthermore, investigators began physical surveillance of the property and the area of 119 or 119 Lambston Drive, Chestnut Hill Township, and in the early morning hours of Tuesday, December 27th, 2022, observed Bryan Kohberger walking near his residence. Additionally, Bryan Kohberger's vehicle was observed entering the Indian Mountain Lakes development on December 16th, 2022. Mm-hmm. And the vehicle is still believed to be on the premises. Investigators are also monitoring Kohberger's cell phone, which appears to be in the same vicinity of this residence on Wednesday, December 20th, 2022. While conducting surveillance, investigators observed Kohberger traveling through Monroe County and arriving back at his residence at Lambston Lane. I mean, it's hard to hear the lead investigator saying that he didn't know Bryan Kohberger's name until the 19th. When clearly,
and it's interesting too Well, it's also interesting too, because in their own document here, they're saying that they began surveillance of the property December 27th, right? Well, we know December 27th is the trash pull. And on December 25th, someone from law enforcement is placing cameras around the property of the Kohbergers. So on Christmas Day, someone is placing cameras from law enforcement on the private property of the Kohberger residence. On the 27th, they're getting the trash. And from what we've heard, the only video they have allegedly of this trash collection is from the officer first driving by to show on his body cam that the trash cans were out at the end of the driveway. And I'm sitting here going, well, if you put cameras all over the property on December 25th and you picked up the trash on the 27th, why don't you have video of that? Where are the cameras that were placed on the parents' private property on Christmas Day? Where's that footage?
Good point. And then with all these observations, it kind of brings me back to the argument that we've always had about these no-knock warrants and how you put so many people in danger and possibly hinder what you can collect in the actual search when you just break down the door and have, one of those massive machine, when you do a raid on a house, when somebody is clearly leaving the home unarmed and easy to take into custody, why you would bust into a house with so many adults present with common areas
At 1 in the morning.
At 1 in the morning.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, right? When you think about it, because at that point they observed him running around, all this stuff. So if you didn't put the property under, so here's what I'm going with here, right? PSP is the one putting the property under surveillance on the 27th. Is it PSP? I can't really read what that says.
Well, let me go a little bit. Let me make it a little bit bigger.
Investigators. It just says investigators began physical surveillance of the property on the 27th. So they observed him. How did they observe him pulling into the property on December 16th then?
That's a good point.
If they didn't start surveillance till the 27th, what do they mean that they, unless they got cameras because it's a private gated community, it has security footage?
I mean, that could be.
I don't know if that's what they're referring to, that maybe they access this security camera footage and that's how they observed him entering the community on the 16th. I guess maybe that's how they know he arrived that day. But it's also stated in, I believe it is the motion to suppress Google, that they watched him enter a CVS in Pennsylvania on the 16th as well.
Yeah. And I have actually, I can bring that up too. I have that actual quote if you give me a minute. I want to also, it kind of like brings up one other issue I think about, which is when you hear Logsdon's testimony as to why they actually did the raid was they saw Bryan Kohberger wearing gloves and they thought he was about to do a cleanup. In the same descriptions, they talk about observing Bryan Kohberger doing what they allegedly thought was cleaning his car. So if they're so concerned that the raid had to happen and there had to be this massive raid because they saw him in cleaning gloves, why did they not have the same impression when they actually thought he was cleaning his car, which I don't actually believe he was. But for them to put that in writing, I don't see, that's a contradiction too. Again,
well, if you're watching him leave the neighborhood and drive all over Monroe County, why didn't you just, this is the thing I can't figure out, because based on everything, it almost sounds like, okay, so the FBI has Kohberger's name, right? Long before December 19th, long before IGG identifies him. They already have him under surveillance. They're already watching him. They know he's going across the country. They're watching him enter a CVS. But basically what Brett Payne is saying, right? MPD had no idea anything about Bryan Kohberger until December 19th. And then that just begs the question, okay, so if FBI is there assisting MPD and ISP, and they've been tracking this guy for weeks, and they believe he is the prime suspect, why is FBI not sharing with the law enforcement that they're assisting? Hey, by the way, we got your suspect, and we're tracking him, and he's on his way back to PA, and we watched him. Do you get what I'm saying? It doesn't make sense to me that Brett Payne here is trying to claim he literally had no idea until IGG. I find that highly unbelievable. But that's just my opinion, you know?
And we can see with our own eyes. I mean, when you see things in writing like that, and I have another little screenshot I want to bring up and discuss with you while we're on the same subject. This is a Facebook post, one of my, and I believe this was from so we were just talking about the motion to suppress the Google warrant. Hold on, let me make sure that's showing. Okay. So I'm just going to read you guys this comment. I'd like your reaction, Miss Potts. So quote from motion to suppress Google warrant. Kohberger was observed entering a CVS in Pennsylvania on December 16th, 2022, and his email account, Bryan Christopher Kohberger, 1994 at Gmail, and phone number was somehow obtained by law enforcement, meaning he was likely under surveillance from Pullman to Pennsylvania. So, are we really supposed to believe that Dylan was never interviewed by any one of those 44 FBI agents working the case, 20 of whom co-located out of Moscow PD offices and shown his picture once he became a suspect? Because I'm not sure about that.
Well, according to their transcript here, it was Vicky Gooch, right? Who showed, wasn't it Gooch who went and interviewed Dylan on December 30th? Showed her. Isn't that the first time Dylan was shown a photo of Bryan, was his arrest? And she said she didn't recognize him. If I remember correctly.
I'm not 100% sure if it was or not, but
just for fuck's sake, Fitziana. Is she in chat still? I bet you she knows what I'm talking about. Darling, for fuck's sake, Fitziana. When did Vicky Gooch? Oh, sorry, honey, you don't know. It's Heather Fitzgerald who I'm talking to. If she's still in chat, she'll know. I'm pretty sure it said somewhere in some fucking document somewhere that Vicky Gooch interviewed Dylan December 30th. And I believe that's when she was given the photo of Bryan. Oh, there she is. See? On the 30th. Yep. Sorry, I swear, Kiki. I hope that's okay. I drop F-bombs.
Oh, God, I don't care.
Okay. I know you don't swear and I do, so I want to make sure it's okay. I'm sorry.
I'm going to tell you right now, a well-placed swear is a very effective way to deliver your point. I just try my best because once I start, I can't stop. So, yeah, and, it's just me. It's just my personality.
So, yeah, it's interesting, right? So you got Gooch here, once Bryan's arrested, showing Dylan a photo of Bryan, and Dylan's like, I don't know who that guy is, right? Interesting. And, even when it comes to Dylan, shit, that's a whole other topic, right? Her first interview, that's when you have your freshest memory. She's being interviewed by Nunes, and she never mentions anything about seeing the perpetrator leaving carrying anything. And then later in the day, by the time Detective Mowry gets to her, and after he's already done a forensic download of her phone, oh, well, all of a sudden there's some kind of questioning happening where she realizes she needs to say that this guy had a fucking vacuum. You know what I mean? It's just really interesting to me.
Now that is weird when you say it like that, because the vacuum type thing should have been, number one, if you're, that should have been the first thing you think of when interviewed. Now that's something I guess I didn't realize, is that the vacuum shaped item she witnessed was in a second interview. Now that is,
well, that's what I mean. If her first interview, she never said anything about the perpetrator carrying an object, right? And then hours later in the day, this is after her phone has been downloaded. It's just my opinion. Detective Mowry is the one doing the forensic downloads of the phone. I'm Detective Mallory, I download her phone and I see that she's texting people, right? If I see text messages about a cleanup, a so and so came and took this, this, and this out of the house, or whatever, right? Maybe I'm going to question her in a way that she's going to know that, oh shit, I need to. There's a reason why the vacuum type object was introduced into her second interview, and I'm not exactly sure why. It's very strange. Your first interview is going to be your freshest memory. And if in your first interview you said nothing about this perpetrator, you saw this perpetrator carrying an object, why is it hours later, by the time Maori downloads your phone, all of a sudden you now know you have to include information about a vacuum or vacuum type object? It's weird.
I mean, I wonder what could have been said. What was there?
If Maori said, hey, Dylan, so listen, we're looking at your phone and we're seeing that at this crime scene between your text messages and your phone, it's obvious. Was someone cleaning up? Did people come over? Right? It's a theory. I'm just theorizing what the kind of questioning could be happening here that would make her feel that she needs to say, oh, yeah, that's right. I thought I saw him leaving carrying what looked like a vacuum. Or do you know what I mean? It just seems very, it's an intentional add-on to the story, in my opinion, just my opinion.
I'm wondering when we heard that brief mentioning of believing that DM heard crying in the bathroom. I remember these early rumors about somebody hearing running water in the bathroom after the crime. Do you remember that back in the day? That was one of the things they thought that the person in the scene said.
I do. I remember hearing like they thought I thought they were saying though, they thought they heard the shower going downstairs, something like that.
So I'm wondering, like, if there was a need to elaborate, we'll just say elaborate rather than, what could it be in the forensic downloads that was in addition to what she would have first said, like you're saying, maybe in those initial text messages, she said something along the lines to BF of, is somebody in the bathroom? Did you hear so-and-so taking a shower? And then how could somebody take a shower?
Right.
And not,
or like if Bethany's texting her, like, why has the water been running for like an hour? What are you guys doing up there? Or something like that. It could just be something really innocuous, but enough to where they're looking at it and like they can see in these text messages that clearly there's a conversation happening here about what's going on in the house, right? Whether it's they're hearing loud, or even if it's a text message like something like, Bethany texting Dylan, like, who's fighting up there or who's yelling, or do you get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
We just don't know. It's just very interesting to me that from her first interview with Noons, immediately, and then hours later when she gets to her second interview with Maori, now this vacuum typed object is introduced into the story here.
Oh, wait, I see Tonka has a comment. I've put a lot of thought into the water running. Maybe Xana was in the bathroom because she'd already been attacked. I have to say, Tonka, I completely echo your sentiments. And trigger warning, we're about to really discuss the crime scene. My feeling is because of the statements when DM says she opened her door because she heard crying. And then the next statement is she thought she heard somebody say something along the lines of, it's okay, I'm here to help you. It sounds like there already was an attack on Xana prior to that final attack where the perpetrator is seen going by Dylan's door. So my thought is there were 3 different attacks. The initial one, when they came in on the 2nd floor, then the 3rd floor, and then the perpetrator came back because he had not finished the job. And that, so I don't know. So I echo your sentiment. I don't know.
See, here's the whole thing with the whole, even her, I saw the perpetrator head to the slider, right? Well, it's interesting because when you look at it forensically, what they're saying is in these, I don't remember what document it was that we were just reading. Maybe it's not the transcript. I don't remember which one it's from, but it's talking about how this latent shoe print. I noticed that Hippler, that was the thing. I think it's in Hippler's decision somewhere. So Hippler's basically saying he leaves out the fact that it's actually the second forensic sweep of the home that locates this latent shoe print, right? He just says during the investigation. Hippler leaves out the fact that this wasn't found on the first sweep, it's found on the second, right? Furthermore, this shoe print, we were told, is in the hall headed towards the slider, according to whatever was presented in, to Hippler in this discovery or whatever the defense submitted as an exhibit or whatever. This latent shoe print is actually at the threshold of Dylan's bedroom, and it's not going in the direction of the slider, right? So if your perpetrator is standing approximately 3 feet from you, the latent shoe print you found should be approximately 3 feet from the threshold of the door, and it should be going in the direction of the slider. And according to what the defense is presenting in this, whatever the sealed hearing was that they did, this latent shoe print is actually like directly on the threshold of her door, and it is not going in the direction of the slider, right? So it's my very strong opinion, this latent shoe print likely, it's not from this person that you claim walked by you. The fact of the matter is, if the perpetrator is approximately 2 to 3 feet away from you, then that's exactly where the fucking shoe print should be, is approximately 2 to 3 feet from the door. Your latent shoe print shouldn't be at the threshold, because think about it. If it's Bryan Kohberger, we'll just say, well, then that would mean at the threshold of the door, Bryan Kohberger is literally face to face with her, not just walking by her. This latent shoe print should be 2 to 3 feet from her door if you go by her story, and it should be going in the direction of the slider. It sounds to me like they're saying, the defense is saying, that this shoe print was at the threshold of her door and not going towards the slider. So I don't know. Does that mean it's going back in to her room? Whatever direction it was going, it's not going in the direction of the hall and the slider.
I completely agree with what you're saying and even just to kind of build on what you're saying, when we read the PCA, it completely sounds like when she saw the perpetrator, she was in frozen shock phase. So she was frozen. She watched the perpetrator walk by, and then she shut and locked her door. And it says, leaving police to believe the perpetrator exited through the sliding glass door. So that means that she didn't shut the door while he was walking by. She didn't shut the door before he walked by. She stood in frozen shock phase, and then after he passed by, she shut the door. So, I mean, as someone said in the chat, it does circle around. Someone said, well, it sounds like somebody had their ear up to Dylan's room. That could be one thing, but I have some other questions when I hear that. Number one, where are the other shoe prints? Just work with me on this. I mean, we've all, when we first heard about the shoe print, we heard about a lot of channels doing even their own studies on this. And in order for a shoe print to be latent, it has to wear out. And even for a shoe print to show up, if there is a booty cover protecting DNA evidence, which it sounds like there was some sort of barrier preventing the perpetrator's DNA from getting into the crime scene, in order for a shoe print to show through a booty, you actually have to do something like 20 to 30 steps, and the booty has to be completely saturated. And at that point, that a booty being so saturated that it leaves a shoe print, it also breaks down the barrier of between the shoe and the crime scene. So then the DNA can get in the crime scene. So that brings up another question, which is if they did the amino black test on it, it's my understanding that the amino black test doesn't always.
I was just about to say, amino black is specifically for like protein.
Well, it sounds like, from my understanding, you can still do some sort of DNA work on the print as well. I mean, the actual DNA, you can't do everything, but you can still do some workup. So I wonder too, did they try and test for DNA in the shoe print? And then on top of it all, when we talk about alternative suspects or multiple perpetrators, don't forget that there was evidence, and I'm saying this to my audience, I know Ms. Potts won't forget, but there's an evidence marker on the high side of the house, which from all accounts was the exit point of the perpetrator when they say sliding glass door. And there was a boot print, evidence marker 3, I believe, is either 3 or 4. So right there.
By the rocks, like by the little rock wall?
Yeah, exactly.
I know what you're talking about.
Going up right next to the alleged diagram of evidence marker 4 they found. So with a boot print and a Van shoe print, that's 1, 2 perpetrators right there. It brings us like full circle back to unknown.
Just DNA. Interesting when you think about, it's just always been interesting to me regarding a latent shoe print that he felt the need to put it in the affidavit that it's found in the second forensic sweep, not the first. It's found using amido black. It's my understanding you're using the amido black detects like protein, right? Blood, vomit, human protein, I guess, you know. That's what it's for. So if you have this latent shoe print that was found using amido black, I mean, my guess is that shoe print is that they stepped in something having to do with, you know, human protein. We'll say, I don't know, blood, vomit, could have been from a party a month prior, right? We have no idea, really. It could have just been like from a party the month prior, someone stepped in puke. Since then, the puke was cleaned up. Maybe they didn't get the whole print. You know what I mean? The floor looked clean, but it wasn't necessarily clean. You know what I mean? So it could be something very, very, it doesn't necessarily mean the shoe print stepped in blood, I guess is what I'm getting at. It is interesting that if they did find it with amido black, I would hope that they tested it for, if they could, for any kind of DNA, just in case, if it was blood. Know what I mean? Just to rule it out.
It also gets to me that if we have a latent shoe print that they believe has something to do with the crime, because they're listing it in the PCA as affiliated with this crime, where were the rest of the shoe prints? How do you have a latent print involved in the crime without non-latent prints before it?
Well, I'm not going to lie to you. I did a live months ago about what I believe the connection between the latent shoe print. I think I titled the live, it was like the second forensic sweep, the latent shoe print, and the sheath. And I've just been of the very strong opinion for a while now that all 3 are married and they're in a very close relationship together. That's all. That's just my pure tinfoil hat conspiracy theory and nothing more. No facts here.
No facts given. Okay. Oh, how could they? Can you give an example? Could you give a hypothetical where all 3?
My hypothetical is that after the crime scene was locked down, because we don't know that they were taken out that day, correct? I'm of the understanding that unfortunately and sadly, the victims were in the home that night still, correct? They were not taken out till I think the following morning, if I remember correctly. And when was the second forensic sweep done? From the first. So I just look at it. If you did the first forensic sweep, it's just always been very interesting to me with the sheath and the question of the sheath. I just have a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory that maybe your latent shoe print and the sheath are very much connected. If the defense can prove it was placed, I'm going to be very interested to see what evidence they have that it was placed and how they think they know that. And part of me has always wondered if they know because of the second forensic sweep. I'm wondering if the shoe print and the sheath were both found on the second sweep. And at some point between the first and second, someone got into that scene and planted it, placed it, whatever you want to call it. But you know, it's just my tinfoil hat conspiracy theory, darling.
Well, all we have right now is speculation. We have a case that's completely gag sealed and redacted. We don't know what's going on with this massive public safety issue. So we sit here and we speculate, but if they are related, I would say if I had to speculate or make a hypothetical on how they're related, I would say this. We had a police department who lifted a shelter-in-place order within 3 hours, saying there was no immediate threat to the public. Why did they have that impression? So something is connected. Something's not being told to us unless that's a complete farce. Like, there has to be something that made people think that the people within that house or the house itself was targeted. Is it evidence marker 4 that maybe that, you know, makeshift thing that looks like a diagram? Could somebody have left something at the crime scene? But something, there has to be something more that we don't know. And if there isn't, I think people need to answer for things. Like, why wasn't there a press conference for 3 days? Like, why did we tell the public everybody was safe? Because we know there was an election campaign that Fry was involved in, and these issues were brought up. I mean, issues with the Idaho 4 case were reasons why he didn't get elected.
Well, see, here's the issue with the sheath, okay? And I'm never going to let it go until I get an actual direct answer, and we probably will never get one unless we actually get it in court. Here's the issue with the sheath, okay? And it's bugged me for so long. You have Brett Payne claiming he is the one who located the sheath and that it was visible from the door on the bed to the right of the victim. So visible when viewed from the door. Yet, in one of Jay Logsdon's filings, he's talking about how the sheath was actually partially under a victim and a comforter. Okay? So now, someone's lying here because one thing, the two are not the same. Okay? Either this sheath is directly visible when viewed from the door on the bed, meaning all of the ISP that was in that crime scene for almost 4 hours before Brett Payne ever arrived. You telling me they're in there for almost 4 hours photographing the scene, doing all of their forensic stuff, and none of them saw a sheath? Plain view on the bed if they were standing at the door of Maddie's room. That would mean any ISP officer, anybody from the forensics team, when standing at Maddie's door, should have been also able to view the sheath. Right? So now that's why I have the opinion that whatever the problem is with this sheath, okay, no one from ISP for the first 4 hours they were there saw it. And then it's Brett Payne who finds it. And I'm starting to wonder if this sheath was somehow located during the second forensic sweep. That's when he located it. I don't know. It's just very strange. It doesn't make sense. If the sheath was visible on the bed when viewed from the door for him, then definitely all of the ISP forensics team that was crawling all over that house hours before he got there should have seen it.
I mean, that's a total question. I've had this question before too, because it sounds like Payne finds the sheath, but then when you look at Blaker's PCA, it sounds like ISP found it and Payne was in the other room.
And then in the testimony, Hippler, one of Hippler's decisions, I think was it Hippler's decision? Was it this transcript? I don't remember. But they're talking about it. And something to do with the difference, I guess, of it's okay that he said it's no big deal, basically, that the two things contradict each other. You have Brett Payne saying that he located it, but also according to him, it was ISP who photographed, bagged, and tagged it. Which is why it makes sense that Blaker's saying, well, yeah, ISP told me they located it. You understand where I'm going with this? That was Hitler's kind of like write-off for it. Well, yeah, it makes sense because even though the two PCAs look like they contradict each other, it does make sense if Payne's saying he's the one that found it, but Blaker's being told it's ISP who found it because ISP allegedly is the ones who photographed, bagged, and tagged it. But then the question still remains, how is it that your ISP forensics team, who've been in the house for almost 3-4 hours prior to Brett Payne and Blaker's arrival, how did they not see it if it was visible when viewed from the door?
I'm pausing because I have like literally no response. I have no objective way to even defend.
Right? Like, I mean, I'm just asking a question. I'm trying to picture in my mind how it is if you're standing at Maddie's door, because we've all done the 3D virtual tours of the home and everything, right? You are standing at Maddie's door. According to him, this sheath is visible. It is to the right of the victim on the bed, visible when viewed from the door. I don't know how then the ISP forensics team missed it.
And just so anyone at home who is trying to get a visual in your head, I mean, we could pull up the crime scene, but just to describe, there would have only been one side of her body visible. So the other one would have been facing towards the wall. And so by the placement of the bed, what Miss Potts is saying is it should have been visible.
Well, he's saying it was visible to him. How is it visible to him when viewed from the door and no one else for hours while they're there? It's going to be interesting to see Smith's body cam, Noon's body cam, right? We do know that they had on body cams. Noon's body cam, if I remember correctly, is the one that was used to identify Murphy, what room Murphy's in the home. So we do know these officers had body cams on. It's going to be interesting if we get to see that, his body cam, he's walking through this crime scene. And if he goes and he stands at Maddie's door, allegedly, if you're standing at the door, it's visible when viewed from the door. It should be on the body cam, in my opinion, which is what makes me think there's something going on here because, the defense has just as much access to the crime scene photos and the 3D Faro scans. And according to Jay Logsdon here, this sheath was not visible when viewed from the door. It was partially under the victim and a comforter. In my opinion, that's giving the impression of it being like stuffed, hidden. Someone tried to hastily hide it in the comforter. You know what I mean? I don't know. That's just my opinion. And I think that's why the defense is using the word placed. I don't know what evidence they think they have they're going to be able to show. But apparently they think they have something. They think they have clear-cut evidence that's going to be able to show the story about the sheath is incorrect.
And
that's just my opinion.
In your opinion, there wouldn't be an officer involved who entered any of those crime scenes or rooms that didn't press on their body cam before they entered, right? There's no circumstance that there wouldn't be body cams rolling on all of these responders, right?
Well, you would hope. Standard protocol for body cams is you usually turn it on before you even get out of your vehicle. Takes about 30 seconds for audio to kick in. So for the most part, when you get dispatched, you want to, as you're pulling up to wherever it is you're being dispatched to, you want to click it on. And you want to leave it rolling the whole time. That's usual standard operating procedure. I would hope that was done here. I'd like to give them the benefit of the doubt that they turned their body cams on. I hope they did. I hope the defense has the body cams. And, you know, I guess we'll see. It just doesn't make sense to me because we found out that it was actually so Brett Payne and Blaker arrived, what, 4:30-ish, allegedly, approximately, right? And ISP was there by like 12:30, 1 o'clock, right? ISP was called in first, if I remember correctly. It was ISP who arrived first. So if it's ISP who's there for hours before your two lead investigators arrive, I'm still very unclear as to how the other ISP investigators just absolutely missed this sheath that is allegedly visible on the bed when viewed from the door. I'm not saying he's the one who planted it. Okay? I mean, do I think that it's likely? Yep, sure do. But that's just my opinion. But I'm not accusing the guy, right? I don't know. It's just very interesting when you think about it. If it's visible on the bed when viewed from the door, how come nobody else saw it for hours until you arrived?
And what were they waiting for to do the investigation too? And just on the same subject of body cams, I'd like to just pivot just slightly and ask you a couple questions when it comes to Murphy and get your thoughts on this. So we heard that from the descriptions of the body cam footage that Murphy was found in a room with it says the door was open. It also said that the other doors were open at the crime scene. Now, we know Murphy allegedly had no evidence on him because we saw that recent TikTok video released where there were young adults gathered in front of that dumpster with Murphy holding him. So obviously he didn't have evidence on him at that time, or we would assume. Do you think when they say that the doors, all of the doors to the victims were open, do you think that they're saying that they were unlocked, meaning the doors were open, they weren't locked? Or do you think that the actual doors to the crime scene were open?
I mean, I think the defense is saying the doors are actually all open. And they would know that if Nunes and Smith had their body cams on, if the defense has their body cams. The first responding officers, if I remember correctly, I think two talks about an officer. It was one officer who arrived to the scene. It was that one officer who went through the house, right? So it would appear that's the guy who had on his body cam. I don't know. It's just going to be very interesting to see what the defense thinks they have for evidence to back their claim the sheath was placed. Right? It doesn't matter what we think. It's going to come down to what the defense thinks they have as evidence to back that.
Well, I think that unidentified male B and D blood is a pretty compelling start. The other thing too that brings up though is if these doors were open, including the room that housed Murphy at the scene. And I'm sorry to just dwell on this, you guys, but these are just the unknown things that keep you up at night about this case. If the sliding glass door was left open, which we learned from these, let me take Bub's comment down here, that we heard recently from the hearings, how did Murphy stay in the house that whole time? Seeing how he was also, I mean, we don't know for sure, there was a dog barking on the security cam at 417 with him spooked and everything else. How was he in the house at that time? And how did he not
didn't Hitler just say in one of his rulings too, that even though the dog was barking for 30 minutes, Payne and Mowry did this bark test to know the dog was outside? And according to what Hitler is saying, the defense is saying, what the defense and Bryan Kohberger are accusing is that whoever was in the house, they're the ones who let the dog in after the crime was done, which is 30 minutes after suspect vehicle 1 speeds away. this dog is still outside barking. And what the defense is claiming is that it was whoever once the deed was done and this SV1 speeds away, that's when all of a sudden the barking stops, and they believe that is when the dog is being let in by whoever is still left in the house. I don't know if they're referring to a roommate, referring to, I don't know who they're referring to, but they're basically saying there's someone still in the house who lets the dog in because the dog abruptly stops barking about 30 minutes after suspect vehicle 1 leaves.
I try to put myself in the shoes of these surviving roommates. And if that's the case, and it's hard to even speculate on that because we don't know if that's actually what happened, but this is what we have to go on. I just,
Well, I mean, the way I look at it is if the dog is outside barking, how is Dylan seeing Kaylee running up and down the stairs with the dog? Number one. Right? Allegedly, the dog is barking. They're hearing thuds, whimperings, right? The dog, okay? It's very interesting. Very, very interesting. When you, even just the dog. I'm of the opinion the dog is not in the backyard. The dog is on the balcony if he's outside barking. He's actually out on the balcony.
And the balcony goes through Kaylee's room. I guess that could leave potential where you wouldn't come across the crime scene if you were to let the dog in. If he was in Kaylee's room and she went and she opened the sliding glass door, let Murphy back in, and that's when they found Murphy, the next day. As far as the
Kaylee's technically dead at this point, though. When the dog is allegedly let back in the house, all the victims have already been dead for at least 30 minutes. Suspect vehicle 1 has already fled. So what the defense is saying is there's someone still in that house after everyone's dead who let that dog in. That's literally what they're saying. Not as bluntly as I just did, but that's exactly what they're saying.
So for the audience watching, I mean, that means one of two things. If she let the dog back in, it was through the sliding glass door. That wouldn't make any sense because she would have shut the sliding glass door afterwards. And why was this?
Well, that's why I don't think that even though the sliding glass door is open, I truly think that even with the sliding glass door open, if Murphy is just, it's wild. Think about being a dog, right? You're just a dog. If he's out on the balcony, crime's over. Whoever it is, the dog's going nuts outside. They let him in. I would imagine he went right out the slider. In my opinion, the dog would go to Jack's if he was outside. I don't think he's just going to hang out in the yard. I think he'd run right over to Jack's house. He knows exactly how to get there. He's walked the trail back and forth to Jack's house 100 times, 1,000 times. He knows that Dad's house is right there, and all he has to do is cut through the little trail.
I didn't even
know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like he would go, but that's just my opinion. I don't know. I mean, I'm of the opinion the dog was on the balcony when they're hearing all this barking, and then whoever let him in, he wasn't outside like in the backyard. I think he was on the balcony.
You're right. Because I mean, I don't know how this scenario could have played out. The other thing is like, we know from the testing in the kitchen, there's potentially crime scene going from Xana's room outside of it, possibly in the hallway, possibly in the kitchen. So if she wasn't going up the stairs to let the dog back in from the balcony, she possibly could have walked across a crime scene. So it would make more sense if she went up the stairs. But you brought up something that I wasn't even going to talk about that I want to talk about, just since you brought it up, is the testimony that Dylan likely saw somebody running up and down the stairs with their dog. And by the sound of it, it had to either be Maddie or Kaylee, and likely Kaylee because it's her dog. And the investigators deciding that wasn't the testimony they were going to go with, and going with another part of the testimony, kind of reminding me of like when Dylan, a DM, said that she heard somebody said, there's someone here, and she thought it was Kaylee, but the police said, because of our forensic download, we actually believe this might have been Xana. It's kind of like that. Why exclude some testimony and let others in? And for me, as somebody following this case, just saying anything that DM or BF has to say, I want to know everything. Like, I feel that their stories are so important. I want to know every detail they have to share. And I cannot see how that's not considered something or testimony that they would go with. And if that is true as the perpetrator walking by in frozen shock phase and clad in black, I don't know, like, who could that have been? Could that have been Xana? Like, I don't know. I don't want to just dismiss that she was saying.
Well, I just always thought it was very interesting too that the police are assuming, right? Well, first they assume that Dylan can't be correct. It's not, no, you heard Xana. You didn't hear Kaylee, right? That's basically what they're telling her. Even though we know you're telling us you heard Kaylee going up and down the stairs with the dog, you're hearing all this commotion. We think actually you're wrong. And it was Xana, right? It's also interesting too that the police are assuming, well, she shut her door and she locked it. And they're saying, well, that leads us to believe the perpetrator left out the slider. Okay, how would you know that? You shouldn't be assuming that. She shut her door and locked it. You have no idea where the perpetrator went. For all you know, the perpetrator went into the kitchen to grab another knife and then go back upstairs. You understand? There is no, so there's a lot of assumptions being made by the police when it comes to what happened in the house, even when it appears the survivors are telling them very specific things. They're either watering it down or leaving it out. And then you have the contradictions, allegedly, according to the defense forensic criminal investigator here, Richard Batanti. It would appear whatever Bethany's statements are to police in her numerous statements, some of that is material and exculpatory to Bryan Kohberger, which is very interesting when you think about it, because then that's when you say to yourself, okay, so now we know why. So Dylan's watered down statements are being added into the PCA, and the magistrate, as Jennings likes to call it, the magistrate isn't being notified that there's another survivor who has apparently conflicting information, and that's being left out.
Yeah, and if we're going to bring this up, we might as well let some of those rumored conflicting statements be unknown. And this is just in the spirit of trying to figure out what's going on. Again, we're dealing with a case that's gagged, sealed, and redacted. We know nothing. But in Batanti's statement, the affidavit that he, when he was initially calling BF in for hearings, some of the accounts that were alleged, and I get this testimony from the family members of Ethan Chapin, who posted it on Facebook, and it's been since taken down. But this apparently, so Ethan's siblings were at the crime scene before 911 arrived, before first responders arrived. And some of the things that were told to the family were they heard what sounded like a spillover from a frat fight, multiple male voices upstairs, which multiple could mean two, the perpetrator and Ethan, but that's not what she was saying. She said it sounded like a spillover from a frat fight. She heard struggling and fighting. There was also rumors, because there's very few accounts of what Batanti got for information. There are rumors that Bethany maybe even discovered the third floor. She may have discovered Kaylee and Maddie. There were also rumors that BF saw somebody naked running by her door. And that wasn't just rumors. When I say rumors, I'm not talking about some online speculation. I'm literally talking about the Mirror, an online publication that's from another country. So they're not bound by the same, gag order that the United States is. And they kept their story up where they had quotes from Batanti saying that
Mm,
she saw someone naked running by her door.
mm. Well, see, notice it's interesting too that like a lot of the shit the media has claimed, haven't seen it once in a court document from either side. Do you get what I'm saying? That's the problem that I have with media. A lot of the stuff that they purported in this case, it, it's not even in a document anywhere, right? Not that we've seen yet, anyway. There's a lot of stuff. So I tend to just kind of, okay, well, let's see what we can glean from what both sides are actually saying. The state for a long time filed everything under seal, so we couldn't get anything unless the defense replied. And then we could get a little, few breadcrumbs from the replies. But now, it looks like the state's like, oh shit, okay, we're going to file some of our stuff public too. So I like to be able to see both sides. We just have a problem where one side here doesn't want to file their stuff publicly until recently. We only get to hear from one side, which is the defense, right? And the
Right.
defense is saying, yeah, and the defense is saying, like, even when we get into Bryan's phone data, even just that little portion alone from Hippler's decisions here, where he's talking about the affidavit of Tom Slavinsky. And, Slavinsky, he's basically coming in to peer review Cy-Ray, back up Cy-Ray's work. And he's providing an affidavit to the court that's letting the court know Bryan's phone was not all the data Cy-Ray and Slavinsky have looked at. Bryan's phone was not in Moscow when they say it was for these homicides. And Slavinsky even apparently goes further in his affidavit there, where he has, quote, grave concern over what they were doing with Bryan's phone data. So it's very interesting.
Well, and I think it plays into what we just saw. Now, if this motion that we've seen on the court summary page, this motion to suppress the AT&T advanced timing records, there, so the audience knows that means suppressing this testimony. Sounds like it's exculpatory. And I had one other thought I wanted to get out when you were bringing up the testimony of BF. It reminded me of something else that sticks in my mind, which is initially when MPD was looking to the public to help them find a suspect, they were looking for the occupant or multiple occupants of the white Elantra. And so if they weren't doing that to throw, because police are allowed to say whatever they want to play the criminal in the court of in the media. They could have been saying something to throw the perp off, allegedly, but they were telling us as a public they needed help looking for multiple occupants of a white Elantra. And it's so eerie going back and listening to that now, knowing that there's multiple pieces of unidentified DNA at the crime scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've always wondered too if maybe the material information that Bethany has to do with that vehicle and knowing it's not Bryan's.
Wow.
That's just my opinion, you know what I mean? I've always wondered if maybe that's her material information. She knows the car that sped away wasn't Bryan's. She knows the occupants. That's just my opinion, though. It could be. At this point with this case, anything. I'm prepared for anything. It's like nothing but twists and turns, man.
And it's crazy because it's like we have less than 4 months to go, and we're all going to be seeing one of the largest cases of our lifetime that we've ever been exposed. So, well,
and I think it's interesting too. We're seeing a lot of DNA people. There's a lot of people in the IGG community kind of paying attention to this. You have like constitutional attorneys and stuff really keeping an eye on this. So it's going to be interesting to see where it goes. When you have people who normally don't really pay attention to anything true crime are keeping an eye on this case, it's because they know it's likely going to be present some problems in the future, especially during the appellate process, we'll say, right?
Absolutely. I've heard Andrea Burkhart saying that even putting the IgG aside, which was a huge concern of hers, and for the folks watching at home, Andrea Burkhart is a defense attorney, and she's also an extremely well-respected true crime creator here on YouTube. But she was saying two of her issues she was waiting for rulings on in this case that will affect her as an attorney are the curtilage issues, when that comes to how they collected the DNA that they compared the Bryan Kohberger's IgG to. And the other thing is the out-of-state fugitive of justice warrants. And I think that a lot of that was touched based on when they were looking to see if there was a Franks hearing, there was going to be a Franks hearing. But this is also interesting too, where, you know, you have a right in this country to face your accuser. You have the right to protect yourself from illegal search and seizure. And it sounds like there are gray areas when it comes to these fugitive of justice, or they have to make somebody into a fugitive of justice sometimes to do these out-of-state warrants. So there's a lot of rulings in here. I know that many people in the legal world are waiting to hear.
Well, that's it. Yeah, it seems to be there's quite a few people who are like, oh man, we need to pay attention to this. And these DNA companies too, these third party, you know, you got Hitler here basically saying, and I'm not trying to shit on Hitler, but you get Hitler here saying that, hey, you have zero expectation of privacy to your DNA once you abandon it. Okay, I'll give you that. But the problem here is that this could present a serious issue in the future. Like, think about a stalker, right? If there's no laws on the book preventing your stalker from following you and picking up your Starbucks cup that you throw in the trash, and they can get your DNA and put it in a kit and act as though it's their own, so that they can learn everything about you, your family, your medical history. Do you understand?
Oh, yeah.
That's basically, yeah, this guy's basically trying to tell us that, like, no, once you abandon your DNA, oh, well, you have no privacy. You have no right to it. That's not true. Like, I understand the argument here for Kohberger, right? You left it at a crime scene, but he didn't leave it at a crime scene. There's no proof he left his DNA at a crime scene. This is transfer DNA on a movable object. And the Lucas Anderson case highlights exactly how someone's transfer DNA can end up on a victim they don't even know and they've never been around.
I really want to elaborate on that too. You know, back to Andrea Burkhart, one of her biggest arguments with this is, okay, if when you abandon your DNA, it's fair game to all law enforcement agencies and everybody on God's green earth to do DNA testing on, then what about minors? Are you telling us that all of our children, when they are done drinking a bottle of water and throw it into the trash at school, the school can now collect their DNA and keep a file on it because they've abandoned their DNA? You can't do that. You can't forego somebody's rights. There has to be legislation written on it. Somebody has to challenge these rulings in court. And I think that now that we have, as a society, a better understanding on the DNA process, it is time, because we don't want to throw away DNA testing, and nobody's saying that the science is invalid, but we're saying that there is no system of checks and balances here. And when you have to follow DOJ guidelines to use investigative genetic genealogy as a tip, but if somebody does something wrong, there is no law in place where they've broken the law, then couldn't somebody intentionally do something wrong without consequences if they wanted to? Where's the checks and balances?
And I look at it too, well, if we have a DOJ interim policy for the FBI as to precisely how they're supposed to do something, and the FBI gets to say, nah, we're going to ignore that today, right? If they don't have to follow their own policies and their own laws, I don't understand why anybody else does. That's the fine line that's being walked here, right? You cannot sit there and tell the public that there's things we can't do because it would be a violation of someone else's rights or etc. Meanwhile, you're not even abiding by anything set forth for you. If you can just ignore these things whenever you feel like it, when it comes to DNA, like, I understand uploading your DNA to a third party database, we'll say. You're volunteering it. But if you're also specifically putting it in a database that law enforcement is absolutely barred from accessing, and the only way law enforcement can get into it is by pretending their profile, by pretending your profile belongs, that it's theirs. They can't tell this database, hey, it's us, law enforcement. We want to know who this profile belongs to. What they're doing is they're backdooring it and they're uploading that profile to say SC, making it look like it's a real person, when in actuality, it's a law enforcement officer who is barred from accessing that database.
Yeah, I want to, just in case anyone at home doesn't know what Ms. Potts is referencing, in that transcript we were just showing under Dr. Leah Larkin's portion, they're reading through and you see this SG, and SG says, no, that's on my side. No, that's on your side, so to speak. That was kind of the context of what he was talking.
This is ours.
And yeah, and so when the investigator says that, when SC says that, basically when you get a profile, you can tell if the match, when you get a distant match, you can tell if the other people on the tree are on your side, the match, or on their side. So that's what he's referencing, is this person's going back and forth with the person on the phone saying, oh no, this match is on my side. No, this match is on your side. That's kind of my understanding of what the conversation was. And so
it wasn't even a conversation, it's screenshots.
Okay.
What Leah Larkin is saying is that in this discovery, she found screenshots. These screenshots are to a SC person. This SC person is screenshotting their match. The kit had only been in the system for 1 day when this SC person got the match.
Yeah.
This SC person is taking screenshots and they are sending it to redacted in an email, basically saying like, this one's ours. So it's my opinion, when they uploaded the profile to GEDmatch, that the database they weren't supposed to go into, the layman's GEDmatch, if you're law enforcement and you're not supposed to be doing that, you can just label it SC, because you already have this other, right? You already have this other thing that Othrum's worked up for you, correct? Now you're going into GEDmatch. So it's almost like it was a quicker way to get a comparison, in my opinion, if it was a cop who did it. According to Ann Taylor, they went into 2 databases they're prohibited from, and they put the DNA in. So I'm of the opinion that one of those that she's referring to is this GEDmatch upload that wasn't supposed to be done. I think it was law enforcement who uploaded the profile to GEDmatch, SC, right? I had a really, I think it was P. Fox and her little big brain. She was like, I wonder if SC is skin cell, the skin cell profile.
That would make tons of sense. Good thought, Meg
Right.
P. No, that would
P. Fox, yeah.
sense.
Yeah, it was P. Fox. She was like, I wonder if SC is skin cell. And I was like, oh shit, look at the big brain on you. Because I was just like, I was like, oh, Stacy Chapin. When I first read it and I saw the SC, I was just like, holy shit. Is Bryan like a third cousin to freaking Stacy Chapin or something? What's happening here? And then, you think about it more and stuff. And I heard some other people talk. And then when you think about what Ann said, no, these 2 databases that the profile was uploaded to, it was law enforcement doing it. Right. So,
well,
it's interesting.
I just want to back up. So there are some things that Miss Potts is saying that can be absolutely backed up by what's in the transcript. So this was the reason why we're not just assuming this was a consumer database and that they had uploaded it into a place where they are not supposed to, is in this transcript. Leah Larkins goes on to say that they actually cited 20,000 different profiles they were sifting through. And if they were using the correct form of this, they should have only had access to about 10. And so it's 10,000. And so she can tell just by the number of comparisons that they had that they weren't in the correct place they were supposed to be. So this isn't just assumptions that we're having. We're literally telling you how the process, and you can tell from the headlines, even in MSM, the headlines are saying FBI uploaded profile to consumer database they weren't allowed to access. So
yeah, so I have a feeling a lot of these third-party databases now are probably feeling the wrath from the people who use them. I don't doubt they probably had many, 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 many people contact them to say, get my profile out of your database right now. Because the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter if law enforcement is barred from accessing the database, they will just pretend your DNA is theirs and backdoor it.
It brings up another question, is if you're putting this personal permanent information online, okay, and you're affiliating it with public documents, with other people. So if I went, just an example, if I went to Ancestry and right now uploaded my DNA, it's permanently linked to other users. Not
even that, but could you imagine? So like, think about the charges, right, that the government would levy against me if I, as a civilian, say, went and obtained an officer's DNA surreptitiously by picking their trash, okay? Because, you have no interest of privacy to it. You abandoned your DNA. You threw a piece of trash out. Imagine if I took, say, an FBI agent's DNA and uploaded it as though it were my own. Could you imagine the charges that would be levied against me by the government for doing that? You're not allowed to impersonate an officer. You're not allowed to impersonate another person. You can't steal someone's identity. So, in my opinion, you shouldn't be. Your DNA is like the most sacred thing. Of course, you have an absolute right to your DNA and the privacy of it. Unless you abandon it at a crime scene. Like if you leave your blood dripping all over a crime scene, that you've abandoned your blood. You've abandoned the DNA. Transfer skin cell touch DNA is not the same. Not the same. It can be brought to a crime scene. It can be your DNA somewhere you've never been. The two are not the same.
It makes me think these consumer databases need to prove who someone is before they accept their DNA as that person. You have to, if you want to buy, cannabis gummies online, there's so many things you can't do online without showing your ID. You can't use PayPal. You can't even really have a functioning YouTube channel without showing your ID at a certain point. Why, when doing something
and a tax form and everything, right? Yeah, you need to show YouTube your ID, you got to do a tax form and everything.
It seems like there is culpability in these DNA databases, knowing how much information they have. They are almost committing some sort of like malpractice, it feels like, to continue to let people do this without having to show ID. Because, we've heard the stories just from covering this case of people uploading their pets' DNA to a website, having a profile come back that completely is farced. And what if they uploaded that pet to your name?
Right.
How would you like that?
And that's the thing too. You could technically put the DNA in and you could like label it. You could name your DNA Alice in Wonderland. You could name your DNA, Bootstrap. Literally, you can name it anything. I'm not exactly sure what the identification verification process is for a database like these. I don't use them. I've never uploaded my DNA. I never will. If you want my DNA, you're going to have to steal it or get a warrant. You know what I mean? And that's just kind of how I feel about that. But then again, too, they said that when, the Rona was going around, when the plague was going around, and we all had to do a test, or if you thought you were sick and went and got a test, they got your DNA that way too. So I don't know. I guess the point that I'm getting at is if you don't have a right to your DNA once you abandon it, no matter where you've abandoned it, you don't have a right to it. I mean, that's leaving the door open. I have a feeling the Supreme Court's probably going to have a lot to say about that down the road.
But in the meantime, for defendants, even you don't ever know if you got a conviction. You don't even know if you'll ever get a chance to appeal or ever get a chance to re-explore these things at Supreme Court. This pre-trial phase is so important. It determines what the trial is, and so we have our eyes on Bryan Kohberger because this is the case that we're covering, but this is happening all around the country. And what's scarier to me is that when we think of other people and how other people are affected, I don't know if you know this, Ms. Potts, but we have the pretrial hearing right now to determine whether the IGG was a viable lead to get to Bryan Kohberger. But if he was another defendant and nobody was watching, and he was facing so much time in prison, and he was told they have this evidence against him, let's just say hypothetically an innocent person was presented with this evidence and they don't know where it's coming from. Because it's pre-trial phase, you never vet out that evidence, and that person would have to plea on that evidence. So people are being forced into plea deals in this country with evidence that might not even be accurate or correct. And so it's not just Bryan Kohberger. When 25% of our population is affected by incarceration, these are the things that, the last thing anyone wants is the one biggest, scariest thing, aside from an extreme offender being out on the loose, walking amongst us in society, is that an innocent person would be put behind bars. And so it's time for all of us to pay attention, because these are the things that are putting our perpetrators behind jury. We could do better. And like we were just saying at the beginning of this entire dialogue, there is no legislation on this. They're just going by guidelines set forth by the Department of Justice when it comes to how they investigate genetics for crimes. So I think I'm going to
the whole thing's very interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see where this case goes. You know what I mean? And I know Hitler just ruled too that for now everything filed on the 24th is going to stay sealed for a little bit. So
I wanted to first off put you on the spot and ask you if I could have you back on the show again sometime, because my audience really, really loved having you here. The chat has been so active, both on your side and on my side. I think you have more people in your chat right now than me.
Oh, my chat. I did. What do you mean, my chat? Where?
You've got like 120 people in your own personal chat. Your chat, this is going on your channel right now.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I have like this dual stream, so you can stream it. So Robert's got it streaming on his channel, I got it streaming on mine, and you've got it on yours. So we have 245 people total watching right now. It was getting up to like 260. But on my channel, I only have like 75. And I think, so the rest are between you and Robert. So you guys.
Wow.
A lot of people.
Oh, okay. Well, hi, everybody. I didn't realize that this was also streaming on me. So holy shit, my mods. That means my mods and stuff are in my chat. Oh, thanks, guys.
Yep. Every time you see the little link on your side, that'll be my chat. And when there's no link in front of it, those are your people. So like Mish Girl's in on your side, Meg P's on your side. Your mods are there. I've been watching your chat. So making sure everybody.
Oh, that's amazing. Thanks, guys.
So obviously the community has spoken and they definitely want you back on the channel. So I hope you come back sometime.
Oh, yeah. Anytime, girl. I have no problem. I just hope that, you don't catch a lot of shit for me coming on and giving my opinions and my thoughts, because as you know, we know how the YouTube streets are. So I hope nobody comes too hard for you because you had a cool conversation with me. And,
I am so grateful to have you here, and nobody better say anything to me. Hey, while we're speaking about the chat, though, I want to say I've seen gifted memberships both on my side. I've seen membership badges flashing, but we've been so involved in our conversation, I haven't stopped by the chat. I just want to say thank you so much for the blessings, and thank you to our mods, and thank you to our live chat for making this such an amazing show. I want to ask you, Annie, do you have anything special this week you want to tell the audience about that they can look forward to? I've got your handle going at the bottom of the screen.
So I'm thinking I'm probably going to be, okay. I don't know. I'm debating if I want to talk about a few things that I found per ISP regarding single source DNA and some of the technology that they use. I'm not sure yet. I have a
Okay.
couple things I'm looking at, and I'm not sure which direction I'm going to be going. But yeah, I probably will be live sometime in the next couple days.
Okay, so everybody hit that notification bell because she hasn't scheduled anything yet. But go ahead and hit that notification bell because you're going to want to catch Miss Potts lives if this is your first time hearing her, because like I said, she's kind of my go-to in this community for going over these documents, and we have a really good group think going on in her chat as well. So
Well, everybody in my chat, if you can hear me, go subscribe over here to Swamp Rose too. I can't see my chat.
And Robert, we should say, make sure to stop by Robert from True Crime Cult as well. I know Robert wasn't able to stay up here with us. He's got a 10-year-old birthday party with a bouncy house and a grill.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Caitlin. We all love you. So with that said, I'm going to sign off. I hope everybody has an amazing weekend. Thank you so much to the viewers. Just if you take nothing else away from the show, please take this. This channel is nothing without you. So thank you so much for showing up, and I hope you guys have a great Saturday.
Bye,
Thanks.
Kiki. Bye, everybody.
Bye.